everybody. Welcome back to the Scarnati Swim Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Scarnati, and we talk all things water safety around here. So if you like that, keep watching and listening. So, on today's episode, I want to talk about a few things that you should not do with your child if they're in swim lessons, especially self rescue lessons. So, I have a list of questions that I usually go through parents if I have or if I've been experiencing certain I guess you would say behaviors in swim lessons, and I feel like I just want to talk about it because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it enough. So um children are complex, and just because one child does one thing doesn't mean the next one will be able to. But I wanted to kind of touch base on these things because I think it's important. So, first of all, do not let your child practice their float in the bathtub. Please don't do it. Why, you ask? Well, when your child is practicing their float, I should probably do it this way. I'll probably do it this way. So, when your child's practicing their float in the bathtub is going to touch their butt. So, they're going to dip their butt to touch the bathtub because they know the bottom is there, right? Well, when you put them into a pool environment, there is nothing to touch their butt. So what's eventually going to happen is their butt's going to keep dropping, looking for something to touch it, and in the pool there's nothing to touch it. So they're just their butt. It's going to be detrimental to their float, or they're going to have it's just going to be harder for them. And I have a lot of parents that come to me and say, "Oh, well, in the bathtub." Please hold. No practicing floats in the bathtub. Now, you could absolutely work on breath control, which I will talk about later. But just as a precursor, try to avoid working on your float in the bathtub unless you have like a jacuzzi tub, and when they're practicing their float, they cannot drop their butt to touch the bottom. Like, it has to be deep enough to where it can simulate a pool environment. Otherwise, they're going to dip their butt and it's just going to be harder. So, definitely keep an eye out for that. Also, do not let your child drink or put water in their mouth in the bathtub. And I say that because I've had the pelican kids where they're like trying to lick the water in the pool. And it's just really hard to develop breath control when you've shaped that habit. It's not doable. It just makes things more difficult for your kiddo. So just keep an eye. Just be mindful of that. It's just something to try to avoid. Also, at bath time. This is let me. Oh, I can breathe for 2 seconds. Sorry. When you have a child in the bathtub and they're not a big fan of getting their face wet, you know those little crowns that you buy that keeps the water out of the face? Don't use those. Don't use those, because what you're doing is you're conditioning your child to not get their face wet. And for some parents, and if you know, the second they get their face wet, they freak out. Like cats to water, freak out. Now, imagine if they were to find their way to a pool and their face gets wet. What are they doing? They're going to be so stressed that their face is wet that they don't even have time to process the environment and situation they found themselves in. So you're never going to get your child over the hump of getting their face wet if you avoid getting their face wet. And I know that that is a huge feat in itself gradually. So what do I tell parents who are in this situation? So if you have a child that isn't happy with getting their face wet, do not buy those crowns, nothing like that. You're going to start a slow process. So take a washcloth, get it wet, drip it over their face, even if it's a few drops. Even if it's a few drops. Every day, increase that frequency. Start with 5 drops, move up to 10 drops, then 15 drops, then a small stream, then half a cup, then a full cup. gradually increase it so they're still getting used to getting their face wet. They don't have to love it. It doesn't have to be their favorite thing, but they have to be able to get through it. They have to be able to understand it's going to take 2 seconds. I'm going to hang tight and it's going to be fine. So focus on that. And again, I understand it's no easy feat. Some kids are like a cat to water. They just absolutely do not like getting their face wet. And that's okay. Again, they don't have to love it, but they do have to be able to do it, because heaven forbid they're in a situation where they have to get themselves through. It's going to be problematic for them. And I say the same thing with goggles. The goggles do the same thing. It gives you a sensory block. So even if you were to go through a WSI instructor through the Red Cross, a water safety instructor through the Red Cross, they don't introduce goggles until level 4, I think. I'd have to double check my paperwork, but I'm pretty sure they don't introduce goggles until level 4. Reason being, same thing. It's a sensory block. So these kids are going to get so used to not getting their eyes wet that when they do get wet, you have a response. They're stressed because they don't know what it's like to get their eyes wet. So it's the same thing in the bathtub or in the pool atmosphere. If you have a kid that doesn't like getting their face wet, try. And I'm reiterating, I understand it's not an easy feat, but try not to cater to them not getting their faces wet, because it's just going to make things more difficult for them. So another thing is having a child in a life jacket when they're so any kind of flotation, really, life jacket, puddle jumper, water splasher, whatever it is that you want to call them. Don't try not to, not even try not, you should not be putting your child in a flotation device while they're in swim lessons. You're undoing everything they're learning in lessons. And if you're paying for those lessons are already costly, and you're causing your child to be confused. What do I mean by that? So in swim lessons, instructors are teaching your child how to be buoyant in the water, how to use their body to either swim or allow buoyancy in the water. So when they're outside of lessons and you're giving them a flotation device that gives them artificial buoyancy, they're not understanding what they have to do. And if they were to fall in without that flotation device, they're not going to know their own buoyancy because they've had help. And I say this all the time, I say this because I talk to parents and they say, "Oh, well, my kid can pretty much swim when they have their floaties on." Let me tell you this. If your child can almost swim with floaties on, they cannot swim. They cannot. If you take that away from them, if you take the flotation away from them, can they swim? No. So they cannot pretty much swim with the flotation on. Your kid's swimming with help. So that's one of the many trepidations I have with flotation devices is it's not only a false confidence for your kid, it's a false confidence for you, because you overestimate their skills when they're wearing that flotation device. You don't know what their skills are without that flotation device. So take the flotation device off, work with them, see where they're at. If they can, swim a little bit, if they could try to float, maybe their butt's, just sinking, then you know what their skills look like without help. But when a parent says, "Oh, they can pretty much swim with their floaties," they can't swim. They cannot swim. Could they figure it out quickly? Absolutely. Nobody's saying that they can't, but they don't know how. They've never done it. So no flotation. Don't do it. And now, if you do, I have links in my link tree of products that I do recommend. So if you do want to use a float, I would recommend a raft or anything with an enclosed bottom. If it allows your child's feet to dangle, don't use it, because it's going to reinforce the vertical posture. And what is that, folks? At this, the drowning position. Don't do it. Put them on a raft, or on my Amazon storefront, I have a boat with a see-through bottom, so they can still sit and see what's going on underneath them. And you don't swim in a seated position, so it's not gonna cause much interference. So if you're in swim lessons, again, don't use the life jackets, floaties, or whatever the case may be. Use something with an enclosed bottom on it. Now, if you're on a boat, then I would say practice your skills before you put the life jacket on, practice your skills while you have the life jacket on, and then practice your skills again after you take it off. So the last thing you're practicing is what their skills are without the flotation device. Of course, we always use flotation devices in open water because that's what's safe. That's what the US Coast Guard issues approvals for. So we're going to use it on open water because it's an uncontrolled environment. We're going to do that. But make sure you practice your skills after you take that flotation device off. Because again, if a child falls in the water without wearing that flotation device, do they know how to adjust those skills without the buoyancy? That's the question. So always practice that. Another thing that I could think of is blowing bubbles in the bathtub. Don't do it. Don't do it. So when you have a child holding their breath, it causes them buoyancy because their lungs are full of air. Now, when they start blowing bubbles, they're going to lose that buoyancy. And if the water surface is here, them blowing bubbles is going to take them further away from their air supply. So you want them to be as close to their air supply as possible. You want them swimming close to the surface of the water. So if they were to need a breath, they could just roll back to their float, get some air, catch their breath, float back over, and keep swimming. So you don't want to introduce blowing bubbles until a strong swim has been established, because again, if they're not a strong enough swimmer to get from this depth up to this depth to get their air, they shouldn't be blowing bubbles or losing that buoyancy. They should be as close to the water surface as possible, so they're ever only 180 degrees away from their air supply. So something to keep in mind too. Okay, what else not to do during swim lessons? Covered flotation, bathtubs, flotation devices. Let's talk about things you should be doing in the water as a parent. So, first and foremost, your child should always be in the water with an adult. A child has no business being in the water without you in it. Yes, I'm talking to you, parents that put flotation on your kids and let them play in the water while you're sitting in a chair poolside watching them. No, get in the water with your child, please. Please, please, please. I'm not trying to make you feel bad about it. I'm telling you, I know enough about drowning statistics that this hands-off approach is not functional for that child, because we've lost enough children to know that parenting approach is not effective. So please get in the water with your kids. Create the need for you within their aquatic environment. If your child knows they can't go in the pool without mommy, or without holding the hand of mommy or daddy or grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle or whatever the family dynamic is, if your child is not used to needing that to get into the pool, what's stopping them from getting in the pool without that flotation device? You're conditioning them to be in the water by themselves, but being in the water by themselves is what's going to kill them. So keep in mind, you should be in the water with your child within arm's reach at all times. And based on skill progression, allow that to be the distance that you stay away from your child. For example, my daughter's 3.5. She's been swimming effectively since she was 19 months old. I will always be in the water with her, but I will allow her to swim. I'll always be within 3 feet of her though. Like even when she's swimming across the pool, I'm swimming across the pool. The only time that we're not is if I'm her swim, and I will film above and below water for her because she likes to watch herself swim. But that's also, I'm a trained professional. Um, I know what I'm doing. And I feel comfortable enough with my child's skill set in order to do that. It would be the same thing with any other swim instructor working with your child. When they back off and allow them to swim and give them that proximity to do what they should be doing, they are skilled enough to know that that distance is safe enough for that child. And also, when you're in swim lessons, you should not be with an instructor that does not allow you to be poolside. Just saying. Now, if they say, hey, so the child can calm down, they're not telling you that you need to move yourself completely. They're just asking you to hide yourself. How can I put it? Children if you create the system, like you hold your child's hand when you cross the street, you put them in the car seat and strap them in when you get in the car, you've conditioned that child every single time they're in that situation. The circumstances are the same. We're going to cross the street, but you're going to hold my hand. We're going to get in the car, but you're going to get in the car seat and you're going to get strapped in. You're going to get in the pool, but I'm going to be in there first and I'm going to hold your hands on the way in. So just understand that you're creating habits with your child, and those habits are going to translate into other situations of their life. And it could not just be swim lessons, it could be something else, but it translates to other situations in their life. So just try to be aware when it comes down to water. Again, we know drowning statistics have told us over and over again that certain, you could go through interviews of drownings to know how many students have had flotation devices in their past, how many haven't, or those other things too. So just keep in mind, like I said, no practice floating in the bathtub. Try not to cater to the fear of getting face wet. Flotation devices, make sure you practice your skills. If you're in open water, make sure you practice your skills after you take the flotation off. If you're in a pool, you should not be wearing flotation. Period. Wearing flotation. Now, if you utilize flotation, again, like a raft or a boat that has an enclosed bottom, fine. That's great. Um, but it's, again, it just I'm not saying this to shame nobody. I'm just saying it to help you. And I hope that does help. But um yeah, if you guys have any questions, leave it down in the comments. Again, Scarnati Swim airs every Wednesday at noon. Um and you can find it on social media too. If you don't ever want to leave something in the comments, send me a personal message. I would be glad to help you. Um And I'm excited to start introducing content for 2024. I'm going to basically go through all the conversation topics that I've covered in the past. I'm going to redo videos. I'm going to re-talk about it. And we're just going to start bumping with the educational content. I've taken a break this year. July, I found out I was pregnant. The beginning of July, I found out I was pregnant. End of July, I miscarried. So 2020, the second half of 2023 was a very difficult one for me. And I kind of took a hiatus from social media because people are flipping mean and I just couldn't take it mentally. So I didn't. um, Lost some followers, all that stuff, but that's okay. I'll get it back. Quality over quantity, that's what it's about. So, yeah, I think again, it's just important to keep these things in mind. Again, I didn't know about any of these things before I became an instructor. Sometimes I'm introduced to something as an instructor and I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. And I'm reaching out to somebody and they're like, oh, well, this, and this. And I was like, gee willikers, Batman, I never realized this was a thing. So, uh, learn experience if you can. And again, as always, leave it in the comments. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.